Alan, this field has become something of a specialty for you. How and why did you get into it?
I fell into it, literally. One day I was at court and a gentleman came up to me and said, "What do I do now?" Who was this man? I didn't know him, but he was someone who had just come out of a court case, having given evidence against his abuser, who had been convicted, and there he was, this gentleman, left literally outside the court, not knowing what to do. His life had been turned upside down, and now he was literally there, left thinking about, how am I going to pick up the pieces, because his whole world had been turned upside down. And that man turned into my very first case where I represented a victim of sexual abuse. And until that point, until that time, I had never really given any thought to what happens to a victim after they've given evidence in Crown Court and seen their abuser convicted or whatever. And so that was my first case, and that was the start of a very big learning curve for me.
So how do survivors or victims get to find you?
Once you garner a reputation, so to speak, of being able to successfully represent victims, you find more come to you. And it's because of that reputation that people seek you out and seek your advice and assistance.
And once they do, how do you treat them?
I treat them with what I would describe as a holistic approach. What does that mean? It means trying to put that person in the position where they take charge of the situation. 11 or 12 years ago, when I first started out in this area of work, it was far more clinical, more black and white. You've got to do this, you can't do that. And maybe decisions and solutions were being imposed upon that client without really giving them the opportunity to work out for themselves, is this what I want to do? Is this the right solution for me?
And now?
And now it's completely different. I'd like to think that I apply what I would describe as a holistic approach, which is effectively putting the victim in charge of the situation and equipping them to make informed choices about what they need and what they want to do. What do they want to do now that they're in this position where they have perhaps disclosed the fact that they've been sexually abused, and they need to know what the options are. Do I go to the police? Am I going to go to court? Am I going to claim compensation? Or am I not going to do anything? And it is all about empowering that victim to make informed choices about what's best for them.
I guess you sometimes have to call on health professionals to give you a hand.
As part of that holistic approach, it is necessary to dovetail what I can bring to the victim with what others can. Psychiatrists, therapists, counsellors, educational psychologists. There are other professionals that very often that person will want to access.
So who pays for these services?
What we look for is for either the abuser or those responsible for the abuser to pay for the treatment, the help, the advice, the representation. And so an important element of a victim's case is accessing those services and being in a position to fund them.
But the client won't be in a position to fund them unless and until he gets compensation.
Indeed, and that's why at Hugh James we have made that decision to be involved in this work, in the knowledge that the vast majority of victims are not in a financial position to access psychiatrists and to pay for court proceedings and so on. And that is why we are prepared to effectively finance those cases, in the knowledge that all will come out well in the end, that the case will be successful, and the abuser or the abuser's employer or whoever will then effectively pick up the tab, as they should, because they're the ones who are responsible for the harm and the damage that that particular victim has suffered.
So where do you go from here, Alan?
Upwards, because it is an upward learning curve in my experience. I have learnt that with each new case, there's some new aspect, there's some new dimension, and you may think that you've heard it all and you realise that you haven't. And so for me personally, I'm taking myself off to college later on in the year to learn more about the psychological aspects that are clearly a major part of a victim's condition or position that they find themselves in. And I want to learn more about what is going on internally for a victim, and that will hopefully enable me to provide a better service for them and will enable me to continue to learn personally more about the consequences of sexual abuse and develop it from there. I think there is still a great deal to learn, and for those of us who have to represent victims, I think that's very important.